We're going to name or write decimal fractions in standard form, expanded form, and unit forms. And when we think of standard form, it's what you normally think of when you think of a number. So if I have 273 thousandths, this is standard form when I write it with numbers. I could also write it as a fraction. So this really is the same thing as 273 over 1,000. Now, expanded form is when I'm taking my number and I'm going to basically stretch it out, and I'm going to represent each digit in my number. So, and I can even find different ways to write it in expanded form. So one simple way would be to write 2/10 plus 7/100 plus 3/1000. Now I could take this and expand it out a little bit further and do copies of these numbers. So for example, I could write that I have 2 copies of 1/10, plus I have 7 copies of 100th, and I have 3 copies of 1,000th. Now, I could also do it another way. I could do it with fractions. 2/10 plus 7/100 plus 3/1000. Now, just as we did up here, where we had different number of copies of those, we could do the same thing with the fractions. I have 2 copies of 1/10 plus 7 copies of 100th and 3 copies of 1,000th. All different ways to write this number in expanded form. Now, unit form is when we're going to name how many we have of each place value or different place values. So to start with, we can just start with the 2 here. We have 2/10. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to write it all in the same line. We have 7/100. And we also have 3/1000. And I could put those all on one line, but I just don't have the room. Now, another way I could look at it is I could look at these 2 digits together, and that's 27. And the last place value is hundredths, so I have 27 hundredths. But I can't forget the 3/1000s. Now I could look at this even further, and I could look at all 3 of these digits together, and I say that I have 273 thousandths. Again, different ways of naming the same number. Let's try a different number. Let's try 1, 6, and 608 thousandths. This decimal here is represented when I use the word and. So in expanded form, I have 1 plus 6/10 plus 8 thousandths. Notice that I don't put anything in my expanded form for the fact that I have 0 hundredths. I don't need to put it in. Now I can also represent this by copies of. So I have 1 plus 6 copies of 1/10 plus 8 copies of 1,000th. As fractions, we have 1 plus 6/10 plus 8 thousandths. Or one more way, 1 plus 6 copies of 1/10 plus 8 copies of 1,000th. Going over to the unit form, I have 1 or 1 whole. Here, excuse me, let's clean that up a bit here. 6/10, 8 hundredths, or I'm sorry, 8 thousandths. Another way to look at it is I could look at these 2 digits together. That's 16, and that last place value there is tenths, so I have 16 tenths, 8 thousands. Whoops, THS. And I could look at all three of these together. 160. Now this is in the hundreds place. Hundredths. 8 thousandths. And one more way. Let's look at all four digits together. 1,608. And the last place value is thousandths. Many, many different ways to write the same numbers. And you choose which way you want to write it depending upon the task that you have at hand.